Kay. Hello everyone. Welcome to another episode. As the train of life passes us by, or we manage to get on it, the tension of energy in this universal sector is being led somewhere. You know, human beings speak about agendas. We consider that individuals may have agendas. We consider agendas to be ideological systems that are trying to overrule the passage of time. And so, the attention of creaturehood will go through phases. In this episode, the attempt, the effort, and the guiding vision is to access an inner experience of probabilities and potentials of the future. Regardless of what I can say, how I can start diving into this concept, I would say that the destiny of lonely smiles at the edge of an inefficient time is a suggestion about the destiny of the psyche, the human psyche. You know, when a person plays chess, they become acquainted with the existence of a chessboard, with the existence of rules and reality, with the existence of pieces, and with the existence of turns. I don't know for what reason, but something activated this in this lifetime of mine, where I would say a major side hobby of mine is wondering about how the future will happen, and in some sense what sort of excitement that creates for what we can potentially do now. The mind of the human being is not just here to move the body, and it's not just here to use language, to worship language. The mind of the human being is here in the same way that when a person drives a vehicle, from inside the vehicle their attention is at the front of the road. Consciousness, even by the likes of Sri Ramana Maharshi and other yogis, is seen as a screen. They speak about it as the screen of pure consciousness from a mystical sense. I would say now, to in some sense collide the previous metaphor into the statement, I would say that consciousness, which is the driving force of the psyche, is like looking through the front window of a car. Now, when a person looks through the front window, they see a scenario, they see a landscape. When the human being wonders about what consciousness is doing, consciousness is not only receiving reality through the senses, but remodifying it in accordance in accordance to how it has kept it from before, how it has kept reality from before. Consciousness is like the window of the soul. That's what I'm trying to say. And the content we find, what we see through the window is not the window. You know? What we see through consciousness as content of the mind is not actually the mind. Really, I have had outer realm, a sort of my own. Pretty much I'm this person in human history who, instead of thinking that I'm just this character in a physical story, which is a sort of impossibility to be a subjective character in a physical body, it's like, no, there's two dimensions happening simultaneously. In ancient thought, in ancient mysticism, for example, in Vedic thought, Purusha and Prakriti, consciousness and matter are simultaneous arisings. They are not in some sense independent of each other, or even though they may appear. That means it's like get a body and over time a mind accompanies it. Now, usually these Mr.Within episodes, they're either inspired by an inner vision, inner event, something of a sort of a spark for the momentum of the talk. And to be very honest, and recently I am trying to incorporate the teachings of, I would say, unconditional love, and to in some sense allow the self of selves to be. I pretty much saw a glimpse behind my eyes, and what I was trying to get to in regards to the body mind, pretty much I see the human position in a present moment of engagement with reality. The way it's engaging reality, it is moving as an object, but it is being still as a subject. In our stillness, we identify, it's like when a person's body becomes still, for example in meditation, they begin to notice their mind. Pretty much, I use the terms the inner realms and the outer realms. So in some sense, the inspiration for this episode is technically from the future of the outer realms. I am envisioning something that I feel is going to happen, and I feel I have envisioned beyond its disadvantage. Whoever you are listening, if you look at the title, I've said destiny of lonely smiles at the edge of inefficient time, and in the subtitle I've written how increasing avalanches of mass loneliness would lead to the activation of the advanced humanity. The idea is that for some reason, I feel that evolution was this natural event and something similar to a sort of boost of the psyche or boost of intelligence, something interacted with, let's say, our ancestral line as a creature, and in some sense the human being has a capability that other species on this planet don't have. For example, our species hasn't made contact with aliens, but if all the other animals were concerned, human beings would be the aliens on Earth. It's like, we are human beings in the cosmos, but we are the aliens of Earth in comparison to other species. Just the privilege of the additional dimensions that are accessible. Now, when I say avalanches of mass loneliness, pretty much my inner vision of the future of the outer realms is that from this artificial divergence from nature, I shouldn't say artificial, but from this supernatural divergence from nature, or I don't know, meta-natural divergence from nature, I would say that pretty much there's a organism, there's a creature roaming this earth. It does not have consciousness. It suddenly acquires consciousness through somehow becoming acquainted with its own shadow, noticing its own shadow, or seeing its reflection in ice or a pond or something. I feel that there has come a sort of unnatural algorithm in the works. So I would say, if we were to kind of fast forward, let's say rewind to the earliest phases of history fathomable, and fast forward into the current 2022, we would see that a creature that was dependent on a natural ecosystem somehow awoke beyond its ecosystem and began creating in such a way that it was as if instead of the world moving us, we started to move the world behind our eyes. And this is the origin of free will, and it is this pattern that really is the seed of civilization 1.0. The idea has been that it's as if before human beings, the universe was administering itself. Now that human beings are alive, have emerged, still the universe is the administrator, but the human inner realm and psychology and free will and position of consciousness is the moderator. Okay? And so the moderator doesn't have the permission, the authority of the administrator, but has an ability to modify certain things from the simulation. So imagine, like, people nowadays, you see, people are talking about, the simulation hypothesis. And the simulation hypothesis is pretty much technology is going to reach a certain point where it's going to be indistinguishable from nature. And then if anybody finds themselves in that technological nature, which is technically a simulation, they will never know it's a simulation. The simulation hypothesis is how in the future we could create a simulation very accurate to Earth. So what is stopping us to consider that previously the world is a simulation? When you look at ancient let's say metaphysical notions, you see that pretty much all of our ancestors considered, majority of traditions considered that Earth isn't the ultimate reality. That means there's so many views on different ideas of paradise from different religions, and at the same time, there's so many different views on how to attain an ultimate state of being. Right? It's pretty much like a creature that suddenly became conscious, noticed itself in this massive cosmos, realized it's on this rock spinning in the middle of nowhere, the magnitude and the vastness of the emptiness of reality. It's as if, it's as if before we draw any lines of meaning in the cosmos, it's as if it's like the empty space is there. Before we draw any line on the piece of paper, the emptiness of the piece of paper is its own potential reality. You see, space is, as you can say, potential reality, and matter is like kinetic reality. Just like we have potential energy, kinetic energy, space is where anything can happen because there's nothing there. And in some sense, matters how, like, there's something there, so something is left to go back to nothing. It's the strange way where if the human psyche somehow manages to see everything as nothing, it will then get everything. And so what do religions say? A majority of religious ideology pretty much says, be humble, sacrifice the individual consciousness that is based on a sort of temporary containment, temporary existence towards an eternal experience. It's as if like this whole time we have not just been material beings, we have been the matter in the space being as well. It's another way of saying that the soul is not just in the body for the spiritual person, but the soul is in the space. That means when people say, I have an out-of-body experience, you're like, oh, cool, the attention is out of the body, beyond the range of the body, and it's being first point of, it's like the attention is not stuck in first-person point of view. But to consider yourself to have an out-of-mind experience, that would be another way of saying to have an out of what is generating conception experience. The levels of consciousness are very fascinating. I feel that on some level, it's like reality is like a coin. On one side of it, life has a collective meaning, and on the other side of it, it has an individual meaning. In front of our eyes, life has an individual meaning. Every person's born and every person dies. The Buddha says everybody's born alone, dies alone. And if there's companionship or anything in the middle of this, it's as if it's a blessing. Buddha had such a strange psychology. Well, I guess strange from modern times, but he had the psychology of a universal king. That means it's hilarious that, in the story of Buddha's father was an emperor, and he wanted his son to not become like a spiritual man and to become like an emperor. And so Buddha ends up becoming the most spiritual man there is in that moment in history, in that era. But I would say at the same time, to become the most spiritual man is to wonder about the origin of manifestation, and to attain anything from this observance is it's a sort of blessing in disguise. It was as if Buddha had managed to find a way in realizing that beyond the mind and body's movement, there is a stillness and silence that doesn't have to be anything. And the purity and the simplicity of how we are just like an unknown viewer looking out through, biological eyes into like a knowable world. Buddha realized the simplicity of the presence of being. This is why a person may have the path of like Raja Yoga or Karma Yoga, but eventually they realize that it's like Bhakti Yoga is the supreme door. Bhakti Yoga is the yoga of devotion. Devotion is a selfless state where harmony is not conditional, where serenity is not conditional, where peace is not conditional. That means if peace is conditional or even freedom is conditional, then the moment the conditions change, that freedom or peace goes away. Pretty much developing from this idea that the human being was a divergence, a sort of shift from the ecosystem to defining itself to itself, defining, the ecosystem. And so that was, in some sense, you can say, the first unnatural event, right? Instead of unnatural, I could use even the word mysterious, but you could say that there has been certain unique turning points for the human species. you know it's like the universe has the potential to be anything, but the life we're living now is the activated potential. It is one of, the infinite branches of, you can say, being. Imagine there's an infinite being, and this species, this world we're all being in, is like one memory. The species had first relied on the environment, just purely the natural environment. As we look at the future generations, we see that they are defining their independence, not being a sort of walk and allegiance with nature, sort of walk with nature, but a sort of walk out of nature. The more the idea of intelligence conceptually becomes devoid of natural elements, it's as if indirectly the species is allowing itself to become a process of a cause and effect-based system, rather than to first see, in regards to the known and the unknown, what are the variables. If the causal position is unknown, we can't know if it is caused or not. It's like saying that there's this idea of the Big Bang, and the Big Bang is a causal position, and the cosmological in philosophy considers a sort of necessity, a necessary designer to the cosmos, as if what pushed the first domino to manifestation. And what is remarkable is that even though human beings feel they are experiencing a temporary life on Earth, the universe is not behaving temporary. The laws of nature are not behaving temporarily. They are, in some sense, being held as absolutes. The human mind, first, its obstacle is itself. If it cannot go beyond itself, it is in some sense still in the inner realms. The second obstacle let me see another way I could say this. self-species world. One experiences the self from the beginning of birth. Their experiences sculpt how their memories become the outline of their self. Eventually, I would say, definitely after 30 years, a person will recognize this. But it's like, after a point of maneuvering and piloting through the individual consciousness of a subjective driver inside an objective vehicle, the attention will get bored of its freedom. That means if freedom is not ever advancing, it is in some sense like eventually it will become a burden, this species of ours, the world, the planet, I would say, is pretty much, or I would say the species is tasked with the challenge of not forgetting this past and in some sense finding new space to allow the future to enter. Right now, what I notice and what I think is going to happen, I was a kid born in 1991, and in my youth, I climbed trees, played soccer, various motivations for outer realm behavior. The more I look at the future generations, it's as if the energy that was being reasoned to in some sense be expressed in the outer realms is slowly being expressed in the inner realms. It's as if like it's the way the human species, I don't know whether it's destiny or it's choice. To me, the avalanches of mass loneliness is this idea that the human species is forgetting the natural dimensions to how it is human. This right now in 2022 is not a big deal. Right now, still there is cravings for immortal technology. People, especially if they don't have multidimensional perspective on life, it's as if they're trying to last as long as they can in a singular dimension. Right now, we don't see it. People are still acting like they don't desire immortality, but the desire of immortality, the more immortal technologies become possible, is going to grow stronger and stronger. Now, the strange thing is that the human brain, think of it as if it's like a USB card or something. And it's like this space. It's this device with space in it. And so this space, at first we think it is limited. The person may be like, how am I, how am I consciously experiencing life all the time? I don't know if people know this about mythology, and if you were to look at, for example, ancient statues of gods and deities or whatnot, you would see that they each, the weapons that they had, what they had in their hand is a sort of shield or whatever, with, in some sense, the objects that one carries, they are suggestions of attributes of consideration of that soul. What I'm trying to say is that the species is technically it has sold itself to a dehumanized destiny. Or maybe a better way I can say it is that the consideration of biology can be seen as a phase. You see, the idea is not just what is the human being, but why is the human being here? Civilization 1.0 could be said to be an artificial prototype of what an advanced civilization should be, or the first prototype. And an advanced civilization, or as I term it, civilization 2.0, is like a new conscious prototype to human behavior and translating into civilization. Civilization 1.0 is like somebody trying something out for the first time and failing. Now the person may give up and think they're destined not to, or the person can choose to see the first failure, the first mistake, as an invitation of the spirit of the craft, you know. It's as if it's like failure is how future victory selects, you know, its successors. You know, visible teachers, they look at how you succeed. Invisible teachers, they look at how you fail. You know, imagine in higher dimensions, there's beings and they're like, yo man, that human being failed in such an incredible way yesterday, you know. What I'm trying to say is, of course, the first thing to keep in mind, as Aristotle says, it is the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. The second thing to keep in mind is that I'm a human being considering what is an efficient use of my time in the conscious waking state. And for me, it is to, in some sense, be like, if the species has an ability to see all the different probabilities to its future, the future generations will intuitively and instinctively be prepared. It's as if how great we live, that energy transfers to the future generations. Technically, you know, human beings are living like light beams. You know, they say light is you know, the smallest energy carrier system. And so what are human beings? They are carrying the energy that is being their life from its beginning to its end. It's honestly like a performance. You know, it's, imagine like somebody who's a performer, they go on the stage and so they have like, let's say 2 hours to perform. And imagine the person midway through the performance decides never to end their performance. And then, like, you know, a bunch of yogis come and say, yo, detach yourself from samsara. You know, not recognizing truth was in the room before we were in the illusion. It's as if truth was being truth before the illusion could be considered, before the illusion was not true. You know, the idea of an original source is an important consideration to have, pretty much I think, based on what I've seen, I would say I've seen some very street smart people indirectly. I would say in my youth I was a shy and silent kid, but the advantage of that was I was in some sense training my observance. In life, we're either in the driver's seat or we're in the passenger seat. You can say most human beings, if they depend on the world, on the outer realms, to give their inner realms meaning, they will be in the passenger seat. Pretty much evolution is designed to, evolution is another way of saying like one species tried to, at least touch the steering wheel. There's many things moving us, right? In front of our eyes, it is the vastness of this edgeless universe, this endless universe with countless galaxies and stars. I remember they said that the mass of objects have an influence upon one another. It's as if it is the moon's tides, it is the moon's gravitational pull that creates the tides. Now, it's as if thinking that, okay, if we're experiencing the gravitational pull of, let's say, a moon in regards to waves, could it be that the human consciousness is experiencing attraction from all other celestial objects in the universal sector? It's as if gravity is a way where the mass of celestial objects, gravity is how stars communicate, or how celestial objects communicate. And the most bizarre thing from astronomy, I would say, is the concept of the black hole. The black hole is like physical proof of nothing. I sometimes think the idea of the black hole must have been so bizarre for the early, let's say, not early, but for the astronomers and, let's say, Hubbleian efforts. Imagine that astronomer, or astrophysicist looking, at looking at just a black hole in a photo where, let's say the background radiation of, let's say, all the stars are being recorded somehow. It would be as if to see something. I mean, it's technically strange how through temperature we can see something, but I would say there's a validity to it, of course. The behavior of the cosmos now can suggest theories on how the past brought it here. If the universe was considered conscious, if right now we don't just consider the human being as being intelligent, but we were wait a minute, what if the whole universe is being intelligent right now? What if the universe is conscious of itself and we are being the thoughts in the mind of an unknown field of activity? This is more an inclination towards traditional spirituality. For me, it took me a while, but then I realized the moment people talk about the soul, they're talking about that which is beyond the implications of the design of an object and the implications of the design of a subject. Human beings have either made a bunch of mistakes in a row or have gone through a series of progressions where some part of the human being, the evolutionary biological animal, it wants things to happen instantaneously, and technology feeds into that urge. So the more human beings become impatient and emotionally oriented it becomes something strange where it's as if the more they become perfect candidates to, in some sense, what I'm trying to say is that if the complete ideological worship, if it's not possible, but if somehow the ideological worship and the ideological possession all over the planet was cancelled out or neutralized, it would be as if the era of the unknown and the unknown self and the unknown world begins. That's pretty much. It's as if destiny is how shape becomes space. From an ecosystem, from an attention dependent on that ecosystem. Okay, to continue. I'm actually going to bring out the notepad. This might make it easier. Pretty much I'm seeing a future where the species experiences mass loneliness, which is a hilarious situation, but that mass loneliness will lead to a greater love for the species. It's as if there will come a time on this planet where a species will realize it is all that it has. as behind every person's eyes, their mind is a hidden universe, and the effort of art is its revelation. You see, if you were a swordsman, imagine you were a swordsman and you had mastered the sword, you had mastered fighting the sword in all the possible ways. Eventually, you will be left to in either, sheathing your sword and holding it till the end of time, or in some sense you seek a new tool. You seek a new dimension of life's meaning. So, if people look at the screen, they're going to see the notepad. And, okay, there we go. I would say destiny would be another way to perceive it, would be the concept of the outcome, or the result, or the conclusion. If we were to look at the concept of, let's say, the lonely are, you can either see them as prisoners of their inner realms, or if a person is lonely by choice, that's called solitude. It's not recommended, but the world rejected. This means those who feel they have been rejected by the world over here. I'll use the term also karmically exiled. This could also be called the divine exile. When we wonder about the notion of smiles, a smile is a sign of some sort of psychological endeavor completing. When I say at the edge of inefficient time, first I'll consider the edge of time. The edge of time is another way of saying it's another way of saying end of change, which is, I guess in a poetic sense, could be said to be eternity. You know, it's like based on if I bring in the compass of the soul, the compass for the soul, or Mr. Within's ring of the absent head, and these are the names for it. It would be as if zero ends in the singular ends in the dual ends at the infinite, and the infinite's ending is the void, and this cycle continues. Now, what would inefficient time mean? And I would say inefficient time is like how the conception here. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the destiny of lonely smiles, the suggestion of the evolution of a biological entity, you know, from starting with a natural body, natural mind, towards a future where either its body becomes unnatural, either its mind becomes unnatural, or worst case scenario, everything becomes unnatural. And so that's another word for inner extinction. If all human beings, through the desire of immortality, choose to become robots in the future, then in some sense it's as if the desire of immortality technologically could in some sense be the sacrifice of our biology, of our naturalness. You know, it's as if we're sacrificing the natural for the immortal, right? Or we listen to the yogis who were in some sense saying, you know, renounce everything. You know, something I've noticed that whether you look at it, I've noticed parallels to this from, you could say, the Vedic perspective and the Taoistic perspective. The Taoistic perspective, I would say in the Tao Te Ching, a statement that Lao Tzu shares. Lao Tzu says the Tao, as if think of Tao or Tao is like the word for the ultimate or the truth of truth. And so Lao Tzu says the Tao that could be spoken about is not the real Tao. And it's another way of saying, like, wait a minute, Lao Tzu is telling us that the truth cannot be told, right? And you look at it from, let's say, the Vedic yogic perspective, and in the practice of yoga, you find these, let's say, archetypes of yogic people who they are like, we need to escape samsara and transcend, beyond this realm, this earthly plane, by renouncing all our desires. But it's as if the desire to renounce, that is also a desire. There's nothing a human being can do which is an inner to outer effort of a manifestation of an act, and desire is another way of saying it's as if you have a sort of address to the vehicle you're driving, or where you're driving to it, right? In the future, when I say the destiny of lonely smiles, we're experiencing a type of, let's say, loneliness where people are, let's say, from a natural phase of human communication and moving towards unnatural phases of human communication. I would give it, let's say, 200 to 400 years where I think this technology will arise. And it would be, in some sense, how children will be born, and they will be, in some sense, raised in cyberspace. So in some sense, before there's a biological life from birth, a sort of psychological, technological cyber life begins for the child. Now imagine you are inside a world and you don't know if it's a video game. So imagine a child inside the cyberspace realm and suddenly notices a glitch to the system. It's as if it's like the exit to the from the Matrix was in an instant, right? It was as if Neo's mind became free instantly, regardless of what he believed, what he tried to do. It was an instantaneous activation. That realization is rendered only through the realize. It's like on some level the mystics were so wise that they were saying, beyond our knowledge, the unknown is watching us. The unknown is watching. That means there's a known event, call it human civilization, human experience, whatever you like, but then there's an unknown event, and this unknown event could be multidimensional in ways that human mind cannot fathom. Right now the person's like, when they wake up in the morning, they're like, yeah, I'm just, good old me, or like they're like, I'm a new self, or whatever. I mean, nobody wakes up saying, I'm a new self. It's as if, how do we know that we know we don't know? What has entranced a species from its nature? Why has evolution arrived? Why are we in the human station? Pretty much a natural organism is slowly being defined by unnatural patterns. Eventually, if the unnatural patterns go beyond 50% of, let's say, the conscious events for that human being, it's like you suddenly notice a shift in inclination to suddenly be a technological being. This can happen in like 400 years, but I feel our species is too smart to, we will bypass it. And this world is very interesting. Sometimes I think, does anything have to mean anything at all? And sometimes I feel anything can mean anything, and nothing could mean nothing. And words could become mirrors pointed at each other, in some sense becoming an infinite reflection. That means imagine the philosophical inquiry into how an infinity, imagine you had infinity staring at itself, and it would be in some sense similar to what we see when we place two mirrors in front of one another. We see an artificial infinity, an optical infinity. There are those who believe in a God defined by language, and there are those who believe in an inconceivable source to the presence of the whole cosmic activity beyond words. The search of man is through words, but what we are is not words. No story can contain the unknown dimensions of that which looks through your eyes wherever you are. This is the first stepping stone of whatever spirituality can mean, right? It's as if like we're noticing the edge of an unknown world. We're noticing the edge of an unknown self. The more unnatural the species becomes, the more it will forget its nature. The attention becomes occupied by the otherworldly, and so the first world gets forgotten. Nature is the first world. Technically, by the ancient yogis, there was like a zero world, but let's say nature is the first world. Then we have language and imagery being the second world, visual imagery. The senses and language being the second world. It's as if a universal event has become an individual wondering about its collective. An unconscious process made a conscious turn and recognized its bizarreness, right? On some level, I've heard people, let's say from a theological perspective, talk about how, like, is God cruel? Like, what's up with this, earthly test? But in some sense, I would say physical cruelty is not the true cruelty. If somebody was to ask me, Mr. Within, what's the cruelest thing you've seen? But at the same time, what is the greatest thing you've seen? I would say how, in some sense, we have opened our eyes to something which doesn't make evolutionary sense, right? It doesn't make sense why evolution from an unconscious movement turned itself into conscious. You see, it's a suggestion of an interference. It's as if we're a natural organism, and some part of our presence, it's like we are the intersection of dimensions. Pretty much, I'm trying to say that post, imagine our nature is being taken away by how civilization 1.0 is creating conditions for human beings to live. You know, it's as if people thought technology is going to be unnatural, or they called it artificial intelligence. I would say language would be the first technology that allowed a human creature to become something else. It's like before language, the attention of the creature was to all sounds at once, but when language came, specific sounds harbored inner images, and so the creature realized it as inner images. And of course, they say meaning precedes language. What that means is the earliest creatures, it's like body language is way more ancient than any language we can speak, right? Like people say ancient Egyptians, like the most ancient language. But in some sense, body language is the most ancient language. And I would say after body language, it's mathematical language, and then after mathematical language, it's, the Queen's English, Or you can say the what I'm trying to say is that if I just get this image out, like the talk is done, pretty much the image is like, what is loneliness? The inner realms are distrusting their expression in the outer realms. It's like you can say that, loneliness is how a person doesn't trust being a person, in the present. That's really the depth of it. The depth of it is that it's not just how others, it's as if we are being viewed from three angles. There's like three types of perspectives that create the world. How the self views others and the world, how others view self and the world, and how the world views self and others. What does true compassion and kindness mean? Does kindness and compassion mean behaving as, for example, let's say antiquity recommends? Or is true compassion to fully see what sort of reality your ability gives you access to, and then becoming embracive of all of that? It's as if for me, the human beings that truly love the world and humanity, and all those people preaching love, it's like beyond emotional love. I would say there is future love. The love for the future is greater, than the love of how the past at dreams and the present, was in its own, let's say, nostalgic time traveling moment. In the present, we are all just existential phenomenology. When it comes in the past, we are the memories that have chosen to, walk with us as if the attention of the presence of consciousness is like a general, and imagine the general of an army just starts walking a direction, and suddenly the commanders, it's as if how an advanced civilization is like, first the soul roars, then in some sense the mind, the commanders of the mind listen to it, notice the general, right? And it's as if you know what it is. It's like one individual. It's like one individual's inner realms begin becoming, you know, aligned to the context of the advanced civilization, and suddenly you begin to see the inner realm of others becoming, and it's as if when enough minds have in some sense organized, have in some sense gathered, you know, the great gathering of minds, you know, then the advanced civilization will work, because the value system of a mental being is very different than the value system of a psychological entity, of a psychological being. It's very different than the value system of a physiological being, right? Physiological being, it's as if the body has like warnings and disclaimers, you know, pain, pleasure, you know, all the different sorts of, you know, emotional wheel that can be applied. The future is truly the definition of divinity. It is as divine as any revelation. It is inconceivable. That means I think about, like, you know, aside from the idea of God, what other things I know that are inconceivable, and I realize the one looking through my eyes is inconceivable. So technically this idea of the notion of soul and consciousness, and I would say that means God could be a metaphor for consciousness, or one can see God being a metaphor for the future, and the future is inconceivable because it hasn't happened yet. Human beings, you know, the moment they realize they're multidimensional beings, they will access a freedom that the outer realms cannot disturb. You know, it's as if like samsara exists because it's as if truth was not seen in the room first. It's like they ask someone, do you believe the self is enlightened? Like, do you believe you're enlightened? And the person says, I don't know. Then they ask the person, do you believe the world is enlightened? The person says, yes. It's as if in an enlightened world, where acting as if freedom is not a possibility, but it is. You know, I'll say it again, it's like behind our eyes, loneliness cannot be an idea. The destiny of lonely smiles. is how these failures that civilization 1.0 is experiencing, it should just see it as the best that our ancestors could do. Civilization 2.0 is the responsibility of the living. An advanced civilization is in some sense a cosmic gift, for the individual and the cosmos. When I say inefficient time, it's as if imagine, like right now we are so blessed that we're on a planet where physically we're not alone, It's like there's so many different types of life forms. It's like honestly, it's like existence is a concert, and every conscious entity on this planet has come to see hear the concert. Has come to hear the great symphony and orchestra of the laws of nature, all playing at once. Whether it has a conductor or not. The edge of inefficient time. Honestly, the word inefficient, at the first way I wrote the sentence, I didn't have it there. But then I thought, the concept of inefficient time is very important. As if the time, it's like all that time that could have gone to efficiency went towards an inefficient view. I would say human beings are not, it's like in the inner realm, sure, a person can be a master of their own destiny, but in front of our eyes, we are servants of a changing world where truth can be only the changeless. It's as if it's like change is the only, truth, and the only way change is being known to be change is that it's changeless. It's like the other side of the yin-yang, someone is needed. Imagine the yin and the yang. Change is yang, and the changeless is yin. Inside a changing universe, there's a changeless circle. That's the soul in the material realm. And I would say inside the changeless, there is you can say, changing being. And that would be another way of saying how a known body is within an unknown mind. Regardless of what challenges the species has to overcome, an advanced humanity only arises from an advanced perspective. And what the advance means is pretty much like the most advanced state of mind. If anybody has seen the Castaway movie, where imagine instead of one person, like a bunch of people were stranded on an island, it's as if the survival mode where they would go in would be one of looking everywhere on the island to see what they can find and use. And similarly, the whole 8 billion human beings should consider that we are actually stranded. It's as if even though consciousness emerged from the planet we consider, but this emerging consciousness through its subjective induced separateness from the world feels it is stranded, in a world so big. It's as if the world is bigger than the space that human beings actually need to exist in. It's as if, what's the game plan? Does the species reproduce till the end of time all over the cosmos? Or does this phase of nature become a sort of its own supremacy? The destiny of lonely smiles at the edge of time, at the ending It's as if so pretty much this, like if I was to decode the title, destiny is like the concept of the conscious conclusion, conscious ending. And an unconscious ending is an accident. So destiny is a conscious ending. It's like it's where what is moving the moment is arriving to, or at, or remembering. When we look at the concept of the edge of time, that's the concept of an ending. So in some sense, what is the conclusion of the ending? And the lonely smile is how the individual is realizing its relationship with the macrocosm. You know, a person doesn't have, like, this is the true value of philosophy, that it opens up the human being and whatever story they have told themselves so far into this recognition that one has a relationship beyond the dimensions of body and mind. Like, people are either trying to have healthy bodies or they're trying to have, like, you know, great minds, right? But the true greatness of the mind is not just only what ability it has, but what role it plays. It's as if, what's the point of having, for example, the IQ test, and there's so many people who score very high on it, but then when it comes to the outer realms, they do nothing. You know, it's as if it's one thing, self-proclamation is one thing, but when the whole species is self-proclaiming the story that the world has to be, it's as if, who says life has to be a story? The mystery is beyond. It's beyond how our brain is happening as the sensory perception, and it is beyond the language that we designed, and it's as if man is in some sense denying anything that is not man-made, only to realize that which made the concept of the man-made is not man-made, it is force-oriented. It's like this, you know, curiosity that if a planet was alive, would it have a personality, or would it just be like a breathing being, you know? If the attention of the future generations, pretty much if the attention of the future generations stops having a relationship with the natural world, it will feel isolated in the unnatural. One of the most important things to teach children in the education system is the distinction between humanized states and humanized states, you know. You know. Here's a quote I'll share with you. Let me see if I can find it. Aristotle has this quote where he says, "He who is unable to live in society, or who has no need because he is sufficient for himself, must be either a beast or a god. Then he says nature does nothing without purpose or useless. You know what he's saying? He's saying that pretty much a suggestion to dehumanize. It's pretty much a suggestion, like what Aristotle is trying to say, is that dehumanized archetypes are both, the lesser worlds are dehumanized, and the upper worlds, let's say the lower worlds are dehumanized, and the upper worlds are also dehumanized, right? And it's only in this, let's say, room of Earth that we are in this place called Earth, we're being human, Imagine in the future there's this hypothetical setting where there's, aliens have come to, shake hands diplomatically in a compassionate, benevolent way with human beings. And so human beings greet the aliens and they say, yes, we're human beings, this is our history, da-da-da-da-da, right? And the aliens are like, it's fine, you don't have to, they pretty much imagine, tell the human species. That they don't acknowledge storylines to consciousness. Imagine a species, like a creature that only instantaneously knows everything in accordance to how energy is the whole event, right? Right now, my body is being part of the moment, but my mind is being the whole moment. When one is present in the whole moment as their mind, then they begin to realize that the whole idea of their self-ego and desires is actually unconditionally kept. It's another way of saying the known ego realizes it's being moved in an unknown way. It's being moved by the unknown. Now, the unknown is a bit strange because the unknown is dehumanized. When I say mysticism is not for the faint of heart, I say that often in these lectures, is because the psychological consideration to the meaning of the moment is shifting beyond memory. That means it's as if when a person wonders, how am I seeing something that's physical, right? They see that it's like lights entering their eyes in contrast to their past memories, the physical has been. It's as if really understanding is how memory is reclarifying itself in the moment all the time. That's really what experience is. It's like the mind is recycling. Is you know what it is? The mind is an endless world generator. The mind is just generating worlds. Like a person can look at someone and think that they're so beautiful that they see their destiny with that person, right? And it's all like a moment simulation. I guess one of the most biggest philosophical, I think, essays and topics that future philosophers, it's kind of like, should walk towards is that, in some sense, what does love mean inside a simulation? Pretty much when one attains, I shouldn't say attains, but let's say one experiences loneliness, it's another way of saying one is left with their self, right? Loneliness is kind of like, indirect meditation. Imagine they ask someone, are you lonely? He's like, nah, man, I've just been meditating my whole life. What I'm trying to say is that we don't know how long the biological human archetype is going to continue. And we don't know how intense or simple, or divine technology is going to be. Imagine in the future, there's like androids that have become conscious, and these androids have converted into like religions. Like imagine the first android that became Buddhist, okay? And the android, or let's say the first android that became a monotheist. It's like that android would be like, God created humans, humans created robots. It's as if technically God created robots. Robots have a connection to God. That's like how an android would like, relate to its source. Because it's either an image of meaning or it's meaningless space. The poet Rumi shares one of the most incredible statements of poem, he has an incredible quote. He says, beyond ideas of right doing, wrongdoing, and right doing, there is a place. I will meet you there. And when the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about, as if we have thought that we are causally incomplete, but the whole idea of enlightenment is that you're causally complete. You know what it is? It's like, this might sound strange, but if ideas were seen as like flowers, or all the different viewpoints of human beings could be seen as flowers in a garden, imagine anybody who just, anybody who worships a specific story to the world. It's as if they're looking, they think as if God made only this flower. It's as if, in the religious book it says God made everything, and people think only the holy book is divine. The world is an interesting place. Multidimensionalism is like the other side of the coin of a conceivable multidimensionalism is the other side of the coin of an inconceivable, I would say, singularity. Pretty much where this unknown whole moment of the world being, or we are, in some sense, it's like the moment the first illusion is made, and infinite illusions can be made from that illusion. The poet Rumi says truth is like a mirror that is shattered into a lot of pieces, into a bunch of pieces, and all the pieces still reflect the truth. The soul is like the shattered, corner of a mirror, which is God. God is honestly, for me at least, I would say the sort of reverence I've had for the idea of God. God to me has been the great mirror. God is like a great mirror in the inner realms. Who looks into it sees, it's as if like, in movies you kind of see like there's this orb, there's this glass orb, and somebody goes and the glass orb shows their future, right? And somebody else looks into the glass orb and they see their future. Or what was it in like Harry Potter? The hat would decide which kid would go to which house, in that Hogwarts, place. And guys, this is a theory I have from Hogwarts, but I think underneath the Hogwarts it's pretty much like, a pig farm, a hog farm, Or if all the kids in the Harry Potter movie were pigs, like Hogwarts would still be a satisfactory name. Oh man. So guys, all I'm saying is that right now everything's cool, everything's chill. Civilization 1.0 is through humor transforming itself, and it's like the comedians, I would say. Like if they were to write a history for the advanced civilization, it's as if before the advanced civilization arrived, comedians all over the planet were trying to stabilize the psychology of the human being by showing that rather than fighting over specific dimensions, we can laugh at things generally. Laughter is really the sign of a free being, right? Sometimes it could be the sign of a free ego, like you have evil laughter in movies. But, evil is just like, how you highlight a moment. Good and evil, they both exist, they're potentials. And based on how you define them, if you see that behavior, it's as if when the inner believed code and the outer, experiential code, you know what it is? It's as if truth is just like how they say the planets aligned, and the luck of the gods was transferred, something like that. I mean, I think nobody says that, but the idea is there, like the planets aligned and a miracle happens. So similarly, I feel when the dimension of the body and the dimension of the mind align, that's what happens. The person suddenly notices the unknown. We are the unknown, guys. But because we fear it, we have ideologically, distracted ourselves from how before we need to look for our true nature's being true. So right now, let's say we're in a natural phase, then it's going to go towards a cyber phase, and then beyond the cyber phase, it's either going to be a new return to nature, or an advancement beyond the language threshold, which means consciousness evolved beyond itself. That's what really transcendence means. It is the shift of the mind into a recognition that the presence of being is an endless ability. It's as if, eternal beings don't get tired. The mind is behaving like an eternal being. If we truly realize like, it's as if we have been gifted, with the most sophisticated antenna that the planet could create. And so we received signals beyond the sky, and so the visions of, a conquest of the whole cosmos. How would I tell you? It's like human beings are just gonna realize that there is, how would I say, just like how we see, for example, certain Amazonian tribes, like certain anthropologists have been just like, okay, leave these guys alone, they have no clue of civilization, society, like have a no-flight zone above their land and all this. So it's just like how there's human beings right now living on the planet that have no clue like what's happening. Imagine like they're living primitively, like spears, hunting deer or whatever, but what I'm trying to say is like, we are the same when it comes to, I would say, a destiny beyond the clouds for the species. one of the signs of an advanced civilization, or I should say better yet, a civilization inspired by galactic, not dreams, but awakenings. The love of all that is the potential of now, and the potential of now only comes from freedom. You know what it is? It's as if, like, if we were to build an advanced civilization, if 8 billion human beings on the planet were like, okay, let's see what would a strategy towards this be. Towards building an advanced civilization, the only strategy is just efficiency in the activation of the greatest forces in one's moment. You see, that is true divinity. It is how, in moments of novelty, the past cannot believe itself. The present cannot go anywhere, and only the future can arrive. The future's arrival is the purest revelation. Because language cannot be God. Do you know? Language was man's interpretation. You see, like, it's as if who made language? It's like language was man-made, and divine revelation happened through language. And so human beings are like, wait a minute, the divine used a man-made system to represent itself. But in reality, I feel all holy books should just be seen as like text messages from an unknown dimension, where the text message is not saying read me forever, but the text message is saying, in some sense, get the point and move on, and advance. You see, advancement doesn't mean we let go. Advancement means the vision of consciousness could be so integrative that everything, it's as if the meaning of everything has never been something that could be even questioned, right? If a person says, what's the meaning of my life? Sure, if there's stories to tell there. But if a person says, what is the meaning of the whole cosmos being right now? It's like its meaning is instantaneous. It is the contrast of more than, two memories two or more memories that, in some sense, the storylines emerge. It's as if before we were a self in a world. Was there a concept of the world? Was there a concept of the self? Or was the moment just, in some sense, like the whole, it's like awareness was where the revelation of perception occurs, and awareness is free beyond, like, consciousness is, we say consciousness because it's conditional. It's a consciousness is another way of saying conditional awareness due to the body, right? But awareness is another way of saying unconditional consciousness. It's like another way of saying being due to never being a self in a world that can be a doer. It's as if there's a dimension of truth that has never gone anywhere, and there is the illusion that comes and goes. And so it's as if our human beings in samsara, or could it be that samsara is in them? There's an idea of possession, for example, in religion. There's an idea of possession in regards to a person possesses objects they own, like, matter, temporarily. It's as if they ask someone, imagine somebody said, I don't believe the concept of rich exists, right? And somebody said that to Karl Marx. Okay, a philosopher went back and said this to Karl Marx. Karl Marx would be like, excuse me, what did you just say? Don't make me get my scythe, and the sickle, The idea would be that because all human beings leave empty-handed, the value of the human being should be seen as a traveler. And it's like the tourist experience. It's as if unknown attention is journeying through known world as a known self. And this known self, the moment it notices it is the unknown, it in some sense, it experientially knows how and this is instantaneous, it instantaneously experientially knows how the existence is being. It's like the instantaneous is where, the language of life's meaning is just knowing. It's like an unknown knowing. You're thinking that it's a known world, realizing beyond what the brain, beyond what the imagination, memory, and the mind. It's happening. There's a way where it's like before language-oriented meaning. It's as if before language being the main, lens of knowledge, it's like everybody has been awareness. Like nobody is unexperienced when it comes to just awareness. It's as if they ask the person, imagine the person says, I'm a professional existential being, right? And they ask, what do you mean you're a professional existential being? And imagine the person says, I have been existing, my awareness has been existing in order for my existence to be made aware, right? It's as if it's as if space, it cannot die. And it cannot have a sort of storyline of a destiny. And if space was alive, it would be another way of saying, like, it's as if, just like there's two brain hemispheres, or let me see what other example I can say. It's as if I'm trying to say the eternal and the temporary are in the same room. Space is the floor of that room. Space is the room where the eternal and the temporary can conceivably be. You see, it's as if there's a level of metaphysics where the person's like, what cool story am I going to find next in my new spiritual experiences? And then there's somebody who's like, okay, what if it is beyond the content of my mind? Right? It would be another way of saying the person has to step for a moment, literally pause all of their value system, wonder about what they're looking at again and how much of it is unknown, and then regenerate a new value system. And the greatest way we can, I would say, keep nature around and not have the future generations be cornered into a sort of outer realm loneliness and inner artificial collectivity in regards to a cyber life. It's like cyberspace cannot replace, the intimacy of an organism, but it can psychologically simulate close to it. It's like honestly a world of simulations, It's like matter was a simulation in the void. Then consciousness was a simulation in matter. Then language was in some sense a simulation. Language was a simulation, let's say after conscious behavior. And then after language, we're going to have cyberspace. And after cyberspace, we're going to, in some sense, it's like, what is the human species doing? It is either walking towards its inner realms or its outer realms. And if it's inner realms, somehow, this is the blessing of the cosmos that the species waits for. some moments it's as if the beyond decides. But the human species must realize how beautiful and incredible it is to be a natural being. And if there is a supreme value to this, just like how religions have endured so long, so will the idea of nature, right? I'm not saying we should become like pantheists, but I'm saying like we should see truth being how everything is happening in accordance to nature. Like our feet are not in the soil, but technically we're still a part of nature. It's like breathing oxygen. It doesn't get more natural than that. But anyways, guys, thanks for listening to this episode. Destiny means how the causal position has already happened. It's as if the title of the episode is another way of saying the freedom of the individual at the edge of the illusion of time. The species must have the courage to become content with its unknown presence, and then the personality becomes a part of the moment that is being moved, not the whole moment. It's as if an idea doesn't act like truth. Truth is where the idea is happening. The closest thing to true divinity is consciousness and its attention. And to discover the nature of attention, we require to study it in, I would say, very accelerated movement, which I consider like an infinite acceleration being advanced communication, or through stillness and silence, which this is known as meditation. It's as if the ancient mystics were ahead of their time because they were seeing beyond time. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I'll share a quote from Lao Tzu. He says, "I have just 3 things to teach: simplicity, patience, compassion. These 3 are your greatest treasures." So in whatever state of mind a person is, they have to try to find the simple source to it. When it comes to patience means having an ability to look at something completely. That's really, or as complete as possible. That's a good definition for patience. And I would say compassion means you are such an able being that you are not, it's not just you have seen the victory of yourself, you're now here to experience the victory of your world. It's like, we don't want a world where like some human beings are like failing and some human beings are succeeding. It's like that world is like a meaningless world. It's like the intent should be the advancement of everything. It's as if we want to get to see what is the greatest potential of all human beings. Therefore, a system around the system has to arise where the human being is the greatest. And when I say the human being is greatest, it is as if based on the past, based on the present, and based on the future. The potential of the past is the DNA, and also like memories, Or one can say memories are technically how the genetical code's behavior outlines the space for them to occur. But there's also more. It's as if I'm trying to say a species is advancing, is evolving beyond dualism. And because it's evolving beyond dualism, it's going to experience just like a space between worlds. It's going to experience a space between dimensions of perceptions. And then from, I would say, an inner freedom, we build an outer free world. if behind our eyes some part of the person doesn't consider that it's like the world deserves its greatest performance, not just, ideas or human beings, everything in this, like that's the majesty of the idea behind the advanced civilization. It's literally like consciousness seeking to advance the whole moment. That means whoever you are right now, listen to me, that means imagine that your most advanced self would be the advancement of all that is meaning. Beyond the dimensional categorization or play. Anyways, guys, thanks for listening. I hope this episode was actually, able to just show how much we need, advanced communicators to build bridges between maintaining natural ways of living. It's pretty much we have to maintain creation and destruction until we have built something, designed a type of world scenario where the fear of the unknown doesn't define how we accept knowledge. Rather, the love for the unknown gets rid of any known fear. Which is another way of saying the inconceivable has a permission the conceivable doesn't. So if one wants the alternate, it's another way of saying the inconceivable. The inconceivable doesn't mean like biological death, even though like that's like everybody's headed there anyways. But the idea is that the inconceivable is how much a program with unknown growing dimensions manages to, what it is? It's like truth is trying to look at itself, and human beings are, and that has appeared as like human beings, using the future as a mirror for the potential of the advanced civilization they see. Honestly, if the advanced civilization doesn't begin in an advanced way, then in some sense, like, it's not advanced. That means the major influential, let's say, the major influencers of the advanced civilization would be those human beings that have at least in one dimension have sought infinite advancement. Just gone as far as they can, and then they're left with the, how far they've traveled, being the wisdom of their journey. So whether I call it destiny of lonely smiles at the edge of inefficient time, it's kind of like, the sadness of a cyberspace loneliness in the future, right? But the idea of the smile is that when the lonely realize it's a universal event, you're never alone. Right? That's the whole point of life. It's so filled with content that you, as only a certain part of the content, cannot feel like there's no other content. It's very hard to be a solipsist when there's so many people around. But anyways, guys, thanks for listening. Much blessings and love.